Okay, now that's
Welcome to Live at the Manor, Friday afternoon with speaker series. And we have a special treat today. If you ever saw these little cats, you will be absolutely astounded. And Susan, just wait a bit longer till I get to the other computer and I'll turn off the. Okay, Susan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good. Okay, so over to you, Susan.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming. One of the highlights of the 80s for me was the production of Cats that played at the restored Elgin and Winter Garden theatres. I remember reading in the papers the great work that was done to restore the two theatres. And our guest today is Marlene Smith, who is the one who was responsible for producing Cats in Toronto that year. So I'm dying to hear all about it. Marlene.
Hi, am I on?
You're on.
I guess I get asked quite a bit about how come I got in this business. It was quite a while ago. My first show ever was Hair. I actually answered an ad in the paper for a job in the office of Hair. And when I started to find out about it, actually what they were looking for was a group salesperson. And so I thought, well, why not? I really wanted, I had 4 children under 6, we did, so it was quite a handful. I had to find some adult conversation. So I took the job and they put the box off. I'm giving you a very long story short here. They put the box office in our house. So you can imagine, I'm married to a very wonderful family doctor who there was a lot of phone ringing. And by 8 o'clock at night, I'd be screaming, don't answer that. That's a hair phone. Box office is closed. Anyway, I carried on, had a great time with that. And then I was lucky enough to get a wonderful, it's become quite infamous apparently, with Godspell, with the original Godspell company, with Marty Short, Andrea Martin, Gilda Radner, Eugene Levy, Jane Eastwood, whom you see a couple of times a night now on wonderful commercials. Victor Garber, who's doing a show out in Vancouver now. They've all, the ones who were really serious about the business stayed in Toronto. They all didn't move to California, but a lot of them did stay here. And we had a great time with that for 14 months. And then we had a bad, I wouldn't call it a bad run, but they weren't too exciting. Some plays that were being done. And the Toronto Star critic is a friend of mine, Gina Mallett, phoned one day and said, this was the worst week ever of theater. And I got blamed a lot for calling them dreary prairie plays because there wasn't anything too exciting happening. It was happened to be a bad month or two. Anyway, she's the one that said to me, oh, go get the Elgin and do Cats. And I said, oh yeah, sure. But I had a lot of denial about the whole thing, saying it'll never happen. That theater hasn't been open for 40 years, et cetera, et cetera. And besides that, it's owned by the government and you will never get in to see the culture minister to discuss it. Well, as it turned out, the culture minister, Susan Fish, was, not to my knowledge, I had no idea. She'd seen the movie, or at least the play twice in New York and loved it. So I spent about 2 minutes with her while she said, sure, do it. So I thought, gee, that wasn't so bad. I can try that. Then we ran into a problem that in those days, they didn't give royalties to shows that were actually running on Broadway. We always got them here after or once they started touring. So that was more than a challenge, I might add, but I did get to meet all the Schubert VIPs and whatnot. And I think they realized it was such a hit. Why not? I mean, I don't know why they decided, but anyway, we actually were the first ones to get rights to do that. So the whole city was unbelievably excited. I mean, even I was shocked. I knew it was a treat and a good idea, but they did put in some rules, so to speak. I guess the first one was we had to match every American with a Canadian, which meant it will, the whole thing would be completely Canadian, which was actually quite wonderful. And so we had to start there. But first of all, we had to audition. And auditioning was just wonderful. So much fun, so much fun. Because the guys from New York actually would just take a look at somebody that walked in and said, oh, there's a Grizz, or there's Bombalurina. Everybody calls them by their cat's name. So it didn't take too long, but it was a real eye-opener for me, because all the dance studios and whatnot that go on in the city, we actually had, I forget the percentage what it is, but it's very high. All the kids that got the original cast, maybe 60%, I don't know, were from Canada's Wonderland. And I thought, how can this be? These kids are such fabulous acrobats and everything. And they're all up in Canada's Wonderland. And it took us a while to get a Grisabella, because it turned out she was so nervous about the audition. She sang for 2 days solid, and she went quite hoarse in the audition. But they knew. I mean, it's so funny the way you pick it all up. And I don't know how many of you, probably quite a few of you saw Cats, because it did run for a long time. The two that do Rumpelstiltskin, who do the cartwheels and everything. I mean, it was an amazing, we actually also crossed Canada. A little bit of a publicity stunt, I might add, but we really did have to have a really good look for all the cast. But we ended up only with one that was not living in Toronto. The second one actually did, but he was doing a show in Montreal. But everybody was here. It was, most of them were at Canada's Wonderland. But anyway, so we got going on it. A huge problem getting the theater ready. You know, it had been closed for about 40 years, and you walked in originally and the whole place was just black and ugly. They had never done anything to it. So we thought, okay, it's a garbage dump anyway. So how bad can this be? You have to be very, like, the glass is half full on these kind of things. So I think, and then we had to get a lot of investors too. Getting investors turned out to be a little easier than I thought it would be, because it is showbiz, and a lot of people, you know, don't have grocery money to give to showbiz. But as it turned out, there's a wonderful fellow by the name of Alan Slate phoned me after he heard I had it. And I knew him from before, luckily. And he said, I got a bunch of investors we get together once a month or something. He said, I think I'm going to present it, if it's okay. Do you want to come and try and get some cats money. I said, sure. He said, all right, we'll have lunch tomorrow. And that was the best lunch I'd had for a long time, getting organized. It worked out really well. They all divvied in. They had the best time, I'm telling you. Then what happened was there are 7 special things that happen in cats. Like her going to, in the smoke and the tire up to heaven and things happening. The day, I guess it was a week before, we heard from New York that they were going to charge. There were 3 people that were not getting royalties for their specialty gimmick. And we had to do that. And one of them was the smoke coming out of the tire going up to heaven. So we had a little trouble with that one. And actually the IATSE guy said, don't pay it. Don't pay it. We can figure this out. So 3 days before we were supposed to put the theater together, I walked into the theater and there were great cheers and bottles of champagne and glasses being going around. We did it. We found it. We can do it. We don't have to use theirs. So they were so happy. So that's what we did. But then I guess it was 2 days before that, I had, probably not a bright idea, invited the investors into the theater. Well, if any of you have ever been into a show that's about to go up, it's not the most wonderful thing to see because it really looks like complete disorganization with electricians and carpenters and everybody's running around and the set was all on the floor. I mean, it was even I thought it was a disaster. And I thought, oh, well, here we go. But sure enough, 2 days later, they were ready to go. And probably we had the most exciting opening night anyone could ever have. And that was what we usually try to do in showbiz. The night before the first preview, we invite everybody who has worked on the show and to come in and see it. And they went crazy. They just couldn't believe it. So they had all seen it. So then the next night we went and we just, I don't know how long it was before we didn't sell a ticket every night. It's a very hard show to do, the dancing, which most of it is. It does have, I don't know, those of you who saw it, the Jellicle Ball runs 18 minutes long, and apparently the longest dance number in a musical theater show. And you can believe they come off exhausted. We had a couple of but not quite diabetic. I mean, we had we use frozen peas backstage in case anybody wonders, instead of ice cubes. For people who fall and Coca-Cola, because a couple of them needed that too. But they all had the best time doing it. It was amazing. Then at one point, I don't know how long it was into the show, they were all getting discouraged because nobody recognized them. Nobody. And here they are in this hit show. And they, of course, are all TTCers. So finally, the director and I got together and said, we have to do something. Let's get them jackets. Well, you've never given anybody a happier Christmas present than a jacket. Every night they'd come in and say, yeah, I wore my jacket. TTC, are you in the show? How'd you get that jacket? Can we get one? They were so happy that somebody recognized them. I mean, it was another lesson for me. I can tell you that it's very important to be recognized. And then I think I don't know, I guess we were here a couple of years. Then the government took a really good look at the theaters because we didn't touch the Winter Garden upstairs. To this day, the Winter Garden and Elgin are the only two functioning theaters called the double deckers that are actually functioning. I think there were 3 or 4 others in the world, but none of them are functioning now. So they took a really good look at it and said, gee, this is a really good thing. This theater works. We should get it organized and do it. So they kind of sent us on our way. So we decided, okay, well, let's tour Canada. Most of the cast toured. And I guess it's very hard to ship a big show like that across Canada because a lot of places don't have the theater, and the gymnasiums of schools that are used as theaters for everybody too. But anyway, one day I got a wonderful call from a fellow by the name of John Dyke, who ran the Queen Elizabeth Theatre in Vancouver, and said, you don't know it yet because you haven't done it, but you're going to have a lot of trouble touring this show, getting places to go, because you're going to run into stuff you have never run into before. And he was right. I mean, we had to look out for they were sowing seeds in you know, out west, and then they're seeding, and then everything you can imagine was happening, and you had to do your tour according to what was happening in agriculture. We couldn't get past Montreal because there wasn't a place big enough. But so we ended up touring Canada as the first big show to ever go. And they were very well received, I must say. I think we spent 4 months in Vancouver. However, the night we arrived to start and get ready, the techs couldn't get all the cab drivers off our sound system. They stayed up all night to fix the sound system. So we didn't get cabs. In fact, we nearly came very close to canceling the performance because they didn't go to bed till 6 in the morning or something. But you know, you learn something all the way when you do this. And they all had a great time. They love touring. Actors like to tour, which I always find strange because I'm kind of a homebody, but they loved it. They loved it. They had a great time. And then we realized we could still go back to Toronto. However, the government at this point had decided they would renovate the Elgin Winter Garden. And that was a $30 million job. Did it very well, very well. It is the most beautiful place, and it is to this day. So, you know, this sounds crazy, and it probably was. We had to redo Massey Hall to get the show because there were no dressing rooms in Massey Hall, basically, at that point. And so we redid that and put it into Massey Hall because we couldn't get into the Elgin. We were slated to go back to it, but they were nowhere ready. I mean, it was never going to happen. So off we went to Massey Hall for a couple of years. So I'm telling you, these kids had such a good time, and they'd also never had a long-standing job for a long time. It was so good for the industry between, I mean, and even listen, the fellow who made all the shoes, who of course was superb at it and much better than the American, frankly, but he had worked with the COC and the National Ballet. I mean, these are very well-trained people. And they, you know, in the States, they think, oh yeah, up there in Canada, it'll never happen. But of course it did. Everybody got great jobs from it, had fun doing it. And we were very glad we did it. Now, I actually did it again. We were 5 years up then. I guess it was 4 years ago. I did it at what was the Panasonic. We had some of the original, we had the original Grizz, for instance, and other people who were in it. And we got it up 4 years ago at the Panasonic. And of course, the Merbai said, "You're crazy, Marlene, because it's not big enough. The stage couldn't take it." And we did have trouble getting her to heaven, poor Grizz. We had a bit of a time with that, but it never did happen the way it should have. But regardless, people love to go to the theater. And I said, look at it this way. It's much smaller. This is now called the CAA, by the way. It's the original New Yorker on Yonge Street. Yeah. That's right. But look at it, the cats can run up and down the aisles all night long and people will love it and have a good time. So we actually got, I shouldn't tell you why, but anyway, I think we lasted 4 months, and then Andrew Lloyd Webber got his nose into it. So we just got out of there, and but it did very well there too, and it was fun. Again, others come from away. I don't know that anything has lasted that long, but I learned a lot from it. Would I ever do it again? Probably, because you know a lot more now than you did then. But there's a lot of work putting up a show, and it isn't for everybody, but I would do it again in a minute. And I actually ended up running, once they got this Elgin Winter Garden organized, I ran it for 6 years, and we had a great time with it. And I'm hoping to see, because I am now chair of the Theatre Museum Canada, I'm hoping we're going into the Winter Garden and Elgin. We're in negotiations. It's a little slow, but the Heritage Trust owns and runs it now. So we're treading lightly, but I think it's going to happen. And we had Christopher Plummer as our honorary patron, because he's been there a couple of times. And we had a do there the other day with Canada Post to announce his stamp, which turned out to be gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And we'll try to do some more good stuff with the history of theater in Canada there. Whether it happens or not, who knows? But I enjoy doing it. I love doing musicals. I'm not big on the Drury Prairie plays, but you have to have them anyway, because that's what keeps the world going around. Now, do you want questions?
Yo.
Oh, I surprise you.
No.
People on the studio out there in Zoom land. Does anyone have questions?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, just say your name and then
Susan here. I just remember some of the stories about when they were renovating it, how they found the original soundboard, mixing board, and also some of the original decoration were beech leaves.
Here.
Okay. So I'll just repeat that.
Susan's asked when they're renovating, they found the original soundboard. What was the other word, Susan?
Some of the original decoration were beech leaves. So there was a call gone out to the people of Toronto. If you have a beech tree, can you give us some of your leaves?
Oh, Beach Street, the original Beach Street from Cat, okay. Do you remember that, the original soundboard, the original Beach Street?
It's actually, I don't know, did I have it on Cats? But they do have a very miniature museum up on behind the Winter Garden on the way to the dressing rooms. There is a museum of all the old equipment up on the floor behind, in the seventh floor, which is really where the Winter Garden is. We tried to put another show in, the one, which one was it anyway, not too long ago, a couple of years ago, and we couldn't do it because that back wall in the Winter Garden is brick, and there's no way. The state, don't forget, it used to be an old vaudeville place. So, and the orchestra pit takes 4 people in the orchestra. So and the back wall is brick. You can't move it. And we just couldn't, no matter what we tried, we could not get the show in there. And it was actually a show about Northern Dancer, the horse, which would have been fun. So, some things you try and some things you can't get by it.
So Marlene, one thing you're leaving out is one of the, I actually thought was an amazing show. Unfortunately, Napoleon. Tell us about Napoleon. You remember Napoleon?
Yeah, yes, I do. I don't want to say it was my worst night.
No, it
was a great show.
I enjoyed it. I mean, because it was quite spectacular.
It was a great show. We had, and oh gosh, I hate to tell you, the 2 boys that wrote it are just adorable. They're so cute, so nice, so young. And we had a great time. And they came in to me one day in the office and said, "We've got a show about Napoleon." And I said, "Oh, that's nice. Tell me about it." So anyway, I said, "You know what? I had just seen War and Peace at the Shaw, which I hated with a vengeance because they used puppets for soldiers, which just drove me crazy. Really, the staff you can have here, what are you doing with puppets?" So I went into a bit of a rant, actually, and said, "You know what, today's not a good day. Maybe you should come back in a while and I'll calm down a bit." So they waited, I guess, about 2 months and worked on the show some more, and came in one day in their tuxedos, tails, and a bottle of wine and said, "Okay, now do you want to hear about it?" And I said, "Okay, start." It was terrific. The authors had trouble dealing with, you have to know when you do a new show like that, the author has a lot to say. And not that I love them to this day, but boy, they just had this idea in their head they didn't want to change. And we looked all around for directors, and because they have the choice. I mean, you have to flow with it every now and again. And the day, I have to tell you the funny story, we went to see Robin Phillips, and who was at Stratford at that point. And I could tell when they got back in the car, that was never going to work, because they wanted the soldiers to be nude. And that was never going to work. So they went onward and upward to the next one, who came very highly recommended, but he was such a handle. By the time we got even through rehearsals, everybody was ready to kill him, and they wanted me to fire him, but you can't fire somebody the week before the show. And it just didn't work out that way. But I did fire him the next day after we opened. London liked it too. JJ, they came to, we got a theater in London. We got another director, very famous gal Francesca, I forget, I think she's at Disney now. Anyway, the 2 boys are doing fine. One works for Disney now, does a lot of their orchestrations for their movies and things. And The other one is up here doing a lot of children's stuff, PBS and whatnot. So they're fine. And we talk about it every now and again because the music was unbelievable, unbelievable. And the sets and everything was so good. But it was also too long.
Just to chime your own horn, to me, it was the caliber of Les Miserables. As a person who saw it was quite remarkable. Napoleon.
Yeah.
And I still remember the scene where Napoleon crowned himself, and you had this amazing altar coming out of the floor with candles coming up. It was truly spectacular. But when you think, let's just a bit back to cats. Before I jump in, does anyone else? Does Betty have a question, or Norma, or any?
Oh, I was just trying to say that I was in Edmonton when I first saw cats. My sister-in-law to be treated me to cats in Edmonton, and I enjoyed it very much.
You saw cats in Edmonton. That must have been this. Do you remember what year that was?
What year, Norma? Oh, I don't know. Multiple years ago. It could have been 40 years ago. I don't know, when did it first open?
Was she in a gymnasium?
Were you in a gymnasium?
It was the theater in Edmonton.
We did get some theaters, but we didn't get a lot. A lot of them, all that stuff is done in the high school.
So Marlene, to your point, I remember the Elgin Theatre when I was 16. I went to see an Asian horror movie there, and it was all black, and it was downtown. But I was big into horror movies when I was a teenager, and it looked, it was an after. It was sort of, the theater had been neglected, but it was probably a good thing it had been, because then you got to go in there, and it was like a blank canvas for you in some respects.
Yeah.
So who was your most favorite cat?
Oh boy. I had a few I was ready to kill, but we actually had one guy, he was in the second group. He was from Montreal, and Madeline, who was the director, and we were there pretty well every night. And then so it was this guy's first night. He'd been in the rehearsal for a bit. And he came out, and during Jellicoe Ball, which is all 22 guys and girls on stage, bouncing all over the place, he started to do acrobats, just, backflips and things in the middle of things. Well, Madeline and I practically had a heart attack because he could have killed somebody. And we soon at intermission, we said, don't you ever try that again. That is so dangerous. I can't tell you. Don't do it. So what does he try again? 3 nights later, he did it. So I fired him. I mean, that was so stupid. We had brilliant kids, but we did have a couple of dumb ones that just wanted to show off. They were all fun. I was sad when the first couple of them left. One was just she wanted to get married, so that's what she dropped from the show. But no, they were a really good bunch. That and the Godspell group were amazing because they all got along so well, had fun. And we did a lot of things during Cats too, because it was, the height of AIDS, and we decided to have a Cats quilt. So every Wednesday at matinee, day in between, and Saturday and Sundays, we'd all go down to the lounge and sew the quilt and have some fun doing that. One of the guys did, actually, it was the fellow, the dresser, that had designed it, named Michael Boncoeur, who we call Bonkers, but had got murdered, which was sad, I must say. But we got the quilt finished, and the quilt went with the other quilts on tour. So as long as you can have a company that gets along, nobody's ever perfect. There's always somebody, but it's something they learn. You have to get along. You're on stage with them every night, so you better.
Where's the quilt now?
I don't know where that whole quilt went. There was a whole bunch of them.
Did Casey House get it?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think I would have known if it went to
Right.
Casey House, because the guys that had sewn it would have known. I don't think it's there, JJ.
Okay, I'll just remind everybody. So just to remind everybody, it was in the 80s, there was a quilt project. And that's for people who had died from AIDS. And so essentially family members and friends created these, and there was thousands and thousands of them.
Yeah.
And I think I recall seeing images of the Washington DC Mall where I think they spread it out there. Is that correct? I think I remember vague memories of that. But maybe it was Central Park. It was somewhere very vast and large and wide. That's quite powerful. So did you have a favorite song? I think that's it.
Well, it would not be memory. Every time I walked into a bar, no matter where I went, I don't know if it was just coincidence or what, but they'd start playing. I think it's the Jellicoe Ball.
Right.
Because the dancing goes with it, and it really is spectacular. No, you try not to get favorites. You do sometimes, but you because you're also company manager, which is like being the mother to everybody. More so even the Godspell kids too. I mean, I still am in touch with most of them. And they become families. Mm-hmm. That's what it is. You live with them forever when you have a long run. So there's nothing you can do but get along.
So Marlene, it's quite wonderful to have you. I remember I got to know Gino. He's actually one of my wider circle of friends. And which cat was Gino? Gino Berti, I think his name is.
Gino Berti?
Yes.
I think he did 2 or 3 because he was a dance captain too for a while. And he's great. I have more fun with him in auditions. Oh boy, some of the comments that we do, you do wonder sometimes why people audition. Like,
yes.
What were you thinking? But they, they're just so desperate to get out there and do it. And so they try, and that's good too. But there's an awful lot of competition here in Toronto.
Huge.
A lot.
So
keep trying.
So Marlene, okay, so let's transport forward. The Theatre Museum, Elgin Winter Garden. What show would you pretend there's no unlimited budget? Would you launch in the Elgin Theatre once it becomes the Theatre Museum?
Oh boy, well, one of my favorite ones that I did, I've done about 61 shows, so it's hard to tell. One of my all-time was Godspell, because I had such a good time and I didn't want to do it. And they guys in New York convinced me that I should do it. So I did that. And one of my all-time favorites is Damn Yankees, the baseball one. Oh, that's a fabulous. So again, it's phenomenal dancing. I love Les Mis. I think Les Mis, I think, in my opinion, the new Phantom of the Opera is not great. For those of you who have seen it, the opening of the second act with the masquerade going, that's not there anymore. It's dreadful. I mean, I don't know what he's thinking half the time, but anyway, it's a good thing. But the costumes weren't as good. I don't know why they redid it. I guess Godspell, Cats, certainly Cats, because it's such fun to watch. You know what's fun about Cats is watching people watch it. People that they're just fascinated. And I know the kids the whole time they're learning that show, because we had a really strict but very good director with Madeline. And it's just watching them how to learn how to do all of this. And it takes a long time, but that and Damn Yankees, oh gosh, it was good. The guy who played the young guy in it, the ball player, also was the Phantom in New York too. And we actually had to go to start rehearsal, and we didn't even have a lead. And I don't think I'd ever want to do that again, because I'd never be so lucky. But the guy was doing it with George Abbott, who wrote it, in New York. And they were finishing Sunday, and he got on a plane, and the agent kept saying, "Don't worry, trust me, he'll be fine." And he was more than fine. A kid by the name of Davis Gaines. God, and he played both the lead roles in Phantom. I mean, he was brilliant and young and good looking. He was so much fun. So, that's what makes shows happy. Hey, if you don't like it, don't do it.
Well, thank you, Marlene. I could listen to you for hours. Maybe we'll have you come back again when you open the theater museum.
Yeah.
But now we pass it over to Susan Johnson to tell us what we're in for next week.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Next week, our speaker is Gordon Postel, who is a minister who has written a book about his journey through life, what he's had to deal with. He did crisis counseling. He was involved with 9/11, providing help there. And so it promises to be quite an amazing afternoon. So I hope you can join us then.
Well,